Hello everyone.
Hi there.
How are we all? Feels like we haven't recorded in a while,
We haven't really.
but it was because we didn't
Couple of weeks.
record last week because where were we?
At Les Mis.
Les Mis,
we did
guys.
mention this in
Oh
one
yeah,
of the other ones.
little Les Mis review.
10 out of 10.
10 out of
5
10.
out of 5, 11 out of 10. Whatever you want to, whatever full marks we're giving. I just loved it.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I did, but yeah,
I'm
it was
so glad.
it was my present to you.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you loved it.
Well, and we had an amazing cookie before we went in.
Oh, guys. Oh, what was it?
Puff cookie or something. Was it puff?
My mum used to refer to farts as puffs.
Or
so
pump.
But
Does anyone say
yeah,
that?
my uncle used to
you
say
pumped.
that. Anyway, yeah, it was something like puff.
Anyway, it was like it was actually a burger place.
Yeah.
By the theatre.
But they were stocking this brand of cookie.
Yeah.
And we saw it in the shop window and just were like, that looks unreal.
You know in like a cartoon where there'd be like a little waft of a smell coming out of a building.
Yeah.
We were like, ooh.
Yeah.
And I'm not joking, guys. Oh, you know when you're like, we've had this once before when we went to Dublin and we had a hot chocolate and we literally will still refer to this hot chocolate that we had in Dublin.
So good.
This is another one of those food moments where you're like, I'm not going to forget eating this cookie.
And I wouldn't even say it was a cookie. It was so dense. It was almost like a
cake.
Yeah, like a cake cookie. But it was one of those that you break it open and the chocolate's like melty.
And they somehow had kept it warm.
It's kind of like a meal in itself though, don't you
Oh,
think?
yeah.
Like,
It's like, cool.
We just had a meal and
Don't need any
finished it
dinner
off
now.
with it. But yeah, guys, had a great time last week.
Another thought though, just to share, I don't know if anyone else has this, but so we on Thursdays would normally be in Birmingham in Rachel's flat doing the podcast. We took the Thursday off doing that to go to London to watch Les Mis. We're watching a matinee, so it's 2:30 in the afternoon on a Thursday, and London's just absolutely going for it. And you're just walking around thinking, why isn't anyone at work? And then you're like, well, I'm not at work.
Yeah.
So people are probably thinking that about me, but you're in the theatre full. Yeah. You're in the restaurant, there's loads of people eating. You're like, what's everyone doing with their lives? It means, I guess a lot of people are just tourists.
But also it's probably because London has such a massive population.
Yeah.
The proportion of people off is just higher.
I don't know though. It was
I don't
just
know why
like
I'm doing an analysis.
No, but it was just like it just felt quite bizarre because it's like it's 2:30 on a Thursday, but it could be like a Saturday afternoon
or just these freelancers.
A bit like us.
Yeah, a bit like us, you could say.
Yeah, flexi
workers.
Flexi workers. No one's working a full-time job anymore these days, guys.
No,
that's so 2020. It's 2025 now.
But we are glad to be back recording.
Yeah, bro.
I'm thinking we just dive straight into this.
Let's do it. So I got an itchy back. Here we go.
So this episode, well, we filmed an episode more recently that was kind of, I guess, more vulnerable, more us telling some of our friendship story. And you guys seem to just, one, really love it, and two, take a lot from it, probably because, we were just getting real, weren't we? And we were sharing the ins and outs. And there is another branch of our friendships in general, that we would like to dig into today. And that is the beastly topic of comparison.
Yes. So today's episode will be titled, It's Not Just You Who Has Struggled with Comparing Themselves to Their Best Friend. That's not what I said earlier.
Yeah. It's not just you who
has compared themselves to their best friend.
Yeah.
You get the gist.
We're talking about comparison in close friendships.
Yes.
Because if you are out there and you have a friendship that is particularly close, maybe you're particularly similar as people, whatever it looks like, the likelihood is maybe at times you've struggled with comparing yourself to them consciously or subconsciously, but it's just quite hard not to, isn't it?
Yeah. It's hard. I honestly, if someone said that they had like a really close friend and they've never compared themselves to them, I would personally just be like, you're lying.
Yeah.
Not to the extent of like it's a massive thing in your life that you're struggling with, but just like, how can you not?
Yeah. When you're doing life so closely with someone and you're, I don't know, well, like for us, like we were working in the same place, living together, have the same friends, doing essentially equivalents of the same life. It would be quite hard to not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways.
Well, that's what we're telling ourselves anyway.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I am.
So yeah, today we're going to essentially take you on a journey, I'd say.
Yeah.
Of the last few years talking about comparison.
Yeah. So sit back, relax, grab a
Get a
cup
cup
of tea,
of tea.
maybe a bicky. And I guess this is our story. This is our story. Well, this is like a story that involves both of us. But I'd say in terms of the comparison struggle, it's more me.
Yeah. So I guess you're speaking from like the perspective of struggling with the comparative thoughts.
Yes.
I'm speaking from the perspective of being the friend in that, trying to support your friend through that, but also kind of being part of the whole situation in itself. So it's quite a challenging one.
I just feel like there we were almost like, if we're about to see like a script reading, it's like, so my character is, she's like 22. She's
go on.
It's like,
set the
and
scene.
go.
Yeah. No. Okay.
So yeah, we've set the scene now.
Okay. So go on. You kick us off.
Okay.
When did those thoughts? What did that look like for you? When did they emerge?
Gosh. And also, guys, I've already cried once this morning, so just be prepared.
In the context of preparing the episode.
Yeah, not just not just in life. Although if I had, that's also fine. But yeah, it could get a bit emotional. I was actually, side note, I was thinking the other day about how like, just feel like in our friendship there was a point where like I never cried and you would be the one that would be crying, and now I just feel like it's flipped.
Yeah, I mean, right now I feel like we're in an era of, I can't remember the last time. Oh, well, you cried today, but other than that.
And I cried the other day to you on the phone.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, but in this actual season that we're talking about now, I would say you were crying a lot more frequently to me than anyway, let's just go. Yeah. I know what you mean.
Anyways.
I do cry though.
It's just interesting.
Yeah, it's
I'm not saying you don't cry, but I think it's more like I was quite like I don't cry.
Yeah.
And my oh my, how that's changed.
My oh my.
Okay, so I think we worked out it was probably like 2021 we're going back to.
Yeah, about 4 years ago.
Yeah, so I was on holiday with some of our friends, and this sounds
me included. Was I?
You were half there.
Okay.
Yeah. Bit of a rocky time for you.
Bit of a rocky time.
This
was in the UK, like we were at like a festival, equivalent of a festival.
But yeah, you were dipping in and out.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's another episode that we'll need to film. Anyway, so I had kind of felt prompted to I'd kind of been there and I've been feeling like, feel pretty good with where I'm at right now in life. Don't feel like there's too many things that I feel like I'm struggling with. But then had kind of, as this time away had gone on, it kind of felt like, actually, kind of just keep having these thoughts come into my mind of like where I've been comparing myself to Rach. And like I said, she wasn't even actually really there. So it wasn't so much that like things were happening while we were there that I was comparing, but almost just, when you almost wake up to a thought and it almost moves from the subconscious to the conscious, and you're like, oh, I've just compared myself there. And it was almost like this spotlight had been put on these thoughts where they'd probably been there for like a good while, but just felt them, like I said, coming more into my conscious brain. And then took a moment and I was like, I'm just going to write down every thought or moment that I've compared myself to Rach, free from judgment, free from feeling embarrassed about what I'm going to write. Like I'm just going to write it all down and just kind of get it out and see what's there to unpack. Thinking, a couple of things. And literally, guys, I kid you not, 2 sides of the journal, 2 sides of A5 were covered. Probably with a few tears as well by the last few ones. You just have like, flip. Like, I think I started, and then I guess because I'd given myself permission to just go and to not hold anything back. It's like, even just tiny little things coming out where I'm like, yeah, I've done that. So, you kind of then sat with this long list of just like loads of stuff, and then just going kind of thinking, so where do we go from here? Like, it's one thing to get it all out, and then you're just like, I almost felt like I'd like unlocked a cage of a beast, and there's like this beast in this cage, and I've literally just unlocked it, opened the door, and now it's just like running rampant,
prowling around
in my life. And it was like, it was in some ways really an amazing point, because I'd say like this was the marker of the start of then going on a journey of, I guess, essentially healing, which I can't, no, but yeah, healing from these kind of comparative thoughts. But I would also say that starting point is just then quite overwhelming, because you've gone from kind of something not even being a thing in your life to this is kind of all I can really think about. And like I said, it's almost like I've unleashed this thing into my world and I don't really know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And like I said, it wasn't, I don't think like, oh, just in this moment, all these thoughts flooded into my mind and I'd never had them before, but more just the awareness of the thoughts that were probably already going on in my subconscious were now very much in the forefront of my conscious mind.
And from that point onwards, was it almost then like in all the situations we were in, the thoughts would come into your mind, and then it was just suddenly like this light bulb moment of like you were actually registering all the thoughts, and then it was very overwhelming because it was almost like all the time, or you know,
as in like when we would then be interacting with each other,
or like not even us, but like let's say it was like a comparative thought around like friends, and then suddenly it's just there in your mind, like how I'm interacting or what, like, you know.
Yeah. So I totally think that was the case. It was almost like, so this was kind of an isolated moment of me writing the thoughts down in the notebook. And then obviously you go back into normal life. And like I said, we were at a festival and kind of on holiday. So it wasn't even like a normal kind of situation. But then you go, you know, we're back in Birmingham doing normal life at this point. We're living, working together, very much overlapping lives. And it was like almost this, just unfolding of all these different situations and moments and times in the day where I was like, oh gosh, yeah. In this moment, I'm comparing myself. In this moment, I'm comparing myself. In this moment, I'm comparing myself. And it was, again, almost, I don't think you can go on a journey of coming out of this stuff without going through that initial, like almost just acknowledging phase. But it is just like so confronting when you're like, I've probably been doing this for ages, but now I'm just so aware and awake to the fact that I have. It's like, oof. Like,
and what was like, how did you then feel? Because I guess then that probably continued, like, to give context, for a couple of years, or like the journey of just navigating these thoughts. And like, when would you say, just for context, that these thoughts stopped, or like have, you know, when would you say that you felt more free from that?
Well, I kind of first, like, I feel like I should just actually name some of the thoughts that I was kind of struggling with. And so, just because we're here now, so why not? So I think a big one for me was around friendships and us, and essentially comparing how people interacted with Rach versus how they interacted with me, and like how many friends Rach had, or how many people would call her a close friend versus, and again, I think this really was exacerbated by the fact that we literally had completely overlapping friendship groups, really. So, or friends in our life at that time. So it's like, okay, we both have this friend. Oh, but they're probably closer with Rach. Oh, we both have this friend. Oh, but like Rach sees them more regularly. Oh, we both have this friend, but I think Rach probably, you know, is closer to them and knows more stuff about them. So the whole, I guess, almost comparison within friendship and how people viewed you and how people responded to you. And I guess when I say that, just basically feeling like people preferred you over me. And I guess where, again, a lot of environments where almost coming as a pair or paired as like Soph and Rach. And this is even like before doing anything with the podcast or YouTube, or, you know, I guess we kind of then branded ourselves as Soph and Rach. But even before that, you know, being very close, being in a lot of the same environments, just feeling like, it was just that feeling of like preference of like people would prefer to spend time with you, prefer to, you know, ... fill in the blank. So that was, I think that was the main big, loud, screaming one, and obviously kind of then filtered into a lot of spaces and areas, again, because we were working together. So even in like a work capacity of like, I don't know, Rach like has more friends at work or whatever. And then, so yeah, I think that was the main one. But, you know, there was like kind of, and I guess within that, that's kind of encompassing it into one big lump sum. But there were probably almost intricacies within that as like a category title of comparison.
Yeah.
But even things like just feeling like, oh, you're more clever, prettier, like basically I think I just got to a point of just any area or anything, I would just be like, yeah, Rach is better, preferred. And just, I think essentially got to a point where I just very much felt like people just see me as Rach's friend and in Rach's shadow. And again, that's then like very broad brushstroke of over like the general, I think, feeling I was just living under at that time.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember like the first time you told me any of that.
I actually can't remember. I don't imagine it took me very long.
No, I don't think it did. I think it was quite soon after that festival that maybe we had been talking about some things that like we feel, I don't know, just having kind of like a deeper kind of conversation or catch up, and some of those things came out. And yeah, I guess then throughout the years, we then had many conversations about it, and we're trying to kind of navigate that. And I think always felt, I remember it was kind of this very hard tension of like, I felt very grateful that Soph felt like she could share and be honest, you know, about those things with me, so that I knew and could be aware, and also just so that I knew what was actually going on in your kind of like life and in your mind, and like try and support you through that. But then it was also the tension of like, it was just such a difficult situation, because from an external perspective, I could listen to Soph, I could try and understand, I could hear about the situations that, you know, would make her feel that way. And from my perspective was like, I just know that some of these things are just categorically not true. But you, like, one, when someone's believing those lies, essentially, you can't necessarily just persuade them that that's not the case. And two, it was a difficult situation because in some ways I was at the center of like the issue that was making you feel like that. And I think that was then just tricky to navigate. And you were always very clear that like there wasn't, you know, specific things I was doing that were making you feel like that. And it was more this kind of bigger narrative and bigger kind of battle that you were just trying to like work through. And I think importantly, had struggled with before with like other female friendships or just like close friends in that sense. Like we were saying at the start, it's quite common to struggle with that kind of thing. So I knew that it wasn't like specific to like my personality or maybe things I was doing. And you never made me feel like it was. But in the same breath, it was obviously like very hard because it's kind of like, oh, my best mate who I like love and care for so much and can see how many people love her and adore her and love her for who she is. Like she can't see that. And somehow I'm like part of this problem directly, indirectly, whatever.
Yeah. And I think I was always just so aware of that. And it was, I mean, it's difficult from both sides because I think I was like struggling with all these thoughts and it was just having a big impact on me. Like it was, I'd say fairly frequent that I was just coming under the weight of these thoughts and it was really just impacting my mood, impacting how I was being as a person. So in some sense, it's like, well, I can't really, you know, when you were saying, oh, I'm just grateful that you told me. It's like I couldn't really not, because otherwise you'd just be like, what the heck's happened to Soph?
Yeah.
So obviously that's my reality. But then I'm like, oh, but putting myself in your shoes, I'm like, this is just so crap for you because you're watching me go through this, like you said, wanting to help, probably not knowing what's best to do, how involved to get, how many questions to ask. And, you know, at this point we're trying to do Soph and Rach together. We're working together. We also just want to be friends with each other, you know, just hang out and be friends. And I think I just feel like, I mean, that I still look back at that time and think there was so many precious moments of friendship in that time, and it was like some of my favorite kind of seasons of my life and friendship and with you. But just so many times, and to be honest, probably loads of them I've just kind of blocked out, but like of just life, like the comparison just sucking the life and the joy out of me, and then therefore our friendship.
Yeah. And to be honest, again, I think probably we both have blotted out quite a lot of it. But even just as you were saying that, I was remembering like there definitely were times where like, obviously, because it was such a heavy, weighty thing for you, it's like I could tell. And I think that's just true. What you were saying, like even if you hadn't spoken to me about it, it would have been obvious. But like, I think particularly like you said, where some of it was manifesting around friends, it's like if we were hanging out with friends or in some of those situations, it's like I can tell that you are maybe something that someone's just said has made you feel slightly insecure or sent you into like that comparison spiral. And then it's like so like hard to watch as a friend because you're like, oh, like no, like now, like almost like shutting down in those moments. And then it's like what to say and how to kind of like whether to like make you aware that like I can see you're struggling, like should we talk about, like, it's just like there's so many, I guess, just things to navigate in that kind of scenario,
which in turn I think just did make for seasons or times in our friendship where it probably just did feel more heavy. But I think this is like we're such strong advocates just generally for doing the hard work in friendships, because for me, like I think I was just getting to a point where I was like, this thing is just so all consuming and is just making me feel so rubbish. And again, not that it is about Rach, but she's the one that's kind of, I've almost connected this comparison thing to. So it's not her, it's not anything that you were doing. But it was linked to you. So then I guess any kind of sort of human survival instinct that kicks in is just like, we'll just get out of this situation then. Like, just leave and just remove yourself from, distance yourself. You don't need to be this close. Why are you doing a YouTube channel at this point? Like, why are you doing a YouTube channel if this is such a difficult friendship for you to be in? It's just adding another layer of, dynamics or ways that people could link you together or compare you, or I could compare myself to you. And I just sometimes think like, oh, well, like actually imagine if that was just the end.
But also like creds to you in terms of, I do think that would 100% have been in that moment the easier option. And like, I think a lot of people would just be like, this friendship isn't healthy for me. And like, when actually it's not addressing the root issue of like what's actually going on. But I think the fact that you actually pushed through that and like knew, I want to like overcome this and not have these thoughts. And I know that like the other side is kind of like a life-giving friendship and I don't want to lose that, is like amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of, as in that's, we're kind of sweeping over things at this point, and it wasn't like in one moment I just decided to keep going. But I think, like I said, we're just such advocates for just do the hard work.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've said before, there were definitely elements to our friendship that I don't actually want to go as far as to say were unhealthy, but I think maybe needed to be slightly shifted.
Yeah.
Which has, for where we are now, made things a lot more, I don't know what the word is, but better, essentially.
Yeah.
And so I think that was all to be resolved as well in this season of life, of just where some things that we've changed now hadn't been changed at this point. So that's all mixed in together. But yeah, just do the hard, like don't give up when things get hard or you feel like you want to run away from a friendship, because that's not what is always required, I think.
And just for some realness, we thought we would share one little story that we
I mean, I completely forgot about this.
I would say that is more a blotting out than
in I hadn't forgotten about it, but I hadn't, when I'd been planning or like thinking of what I wanted to share in this episode, I had not included it. And then Rach was like, what about when we went to Cornwall? And I was like, ooh.
They're like, I haven't forgotten. No, there was this one time we went to Cornwall and we were actually supposed to be celebrating over this time, just like the launch of our podcast and kind of towards the start where there'd been some great success with it.
Been in the podcast charts.
Yeah,
guys.
we'd been in the podcast charts, and
so we thought, what better than an M&S meal deal?
Yeah, there was one of the nights where we were like, oh, let's celebrate that. Like, let's actually like mark that moment, have a nice little meal. And it was at the time where something had happened that had triggered kind of a lot of comparison for you, and kind of some of those like insecurities were flaring up quite strongly.
But I guess the difference of this thing is that it wasn't like a thought thing. It was kind of like a reality thing.
Yeah, it had, I guess, felt like one of these main
fears
for you of like, you know, like we were saying, where Soph believed, oh, people prefer me to her, or, you know, it had felt like that had been confirmed in this scenario. So rather than, I guess, that scenario staying in perspective, it had kind of obviously blown up in your mind and triggered all of these things. And I would say it was almost like the lowest point potentially for you, like one of the lowest points in this whole process. And I guess throughout that night, even though we'd been trying to stay on the podcast theme, it obviously led into some conversations about this.
Yeah, the thing is though, because from my memory, it wasn't like I didn't go into that meal in like a bad mood. I think the conversation must have just turned.
But I think that actually is probably quite a helpful example of like, if something's weighing on one of you that heavily, it probably is going to come up, like, because you know,
but as in I don't feel like I started in a bad, as in I wasn't like sitting down at the beginning of the meal.
No, but just like subconsciously,
it's there. Yeah.
And whatever,
it's gonna rear its head.
We ended up talking about it, and then I think that was probably just a time where you expressed like the full extent of some of these thoughts, and I would just describe it as like listening to it and feeling like you had lost like total hope of ever kind of not having some of these thoughts in your mind. And also I think there had just been like lies upon lies upon lies upon lies, like, you know, like I guess at the time, like throughout those couple of years, there may have been moments where you'd shared things and I could kind of see potentially why your mind was thinking that way. But I think in some of these conversations over that time in Cornwall, it was like, this is now just gone like way too far, and actually like it feels a bit like you're drowning in these lies and I'm trying to like pull you out of them. And also there had been something happen that had like, you know, made it worse.
Yeah. And I think I would just say that I think why this, well, I guess where you're saying this was a moment where you feel like you probably saw the most, like the fullest kind of reality of what was going on in my mind was like, I think, well, we were saying earlier, weren't we? It was like, I wouldn't go so far as say an argument, but I'd say we were speaking quite unfiltered.
Yeah.
And so I think it was like where I'd maybe been in the past holding back out of like, maybe firstly just like embarrassment, like it just feels quite embarrassing to admit some of these things, but also just because they're about rach, it's like I would never want to put on her like, yeah, this is everything I've ever thought in you know, relation to comparison against you. But I don't know what, I think it was just how awful I was feeling on this particular day in this moment where it was like, it was just quite an...
Yeah, and I was also, I don't think I responded like the best way in terms of, obviously it's quite hard to know how to respond, but equally, I think I ended up kind of getting more like angry with it, just in terms of probably like exasperation of like, come on, when actually that's not really like the right response or kind of the most helpful response in that moment. So anyway, it all just kind of like erupted in I was saying to Soph, like, yeah, it was more just felt like one of those arguments you would kind of have with a sibling rather than how you would talk to like a friend, of like the filters just came off and it was like just obviously this raw emotion. And then I remember the next, like when we drove back, I think it was the next day, that was also just it was just very sad, but it was just so like really kind of expressing that emotion. I think in that moment where the night before had probably been more like frustration and maybe a bit of anger from both of us. That was more just like sadness and like pain, and Soph just crying.
I was just crying my eyes out.
Yeah.
Like I just remember just crying and crying and crying. And like I just remember we got to a service station and it was just kind of like, anyway, should we have a Burger King? Like, do you know, you just like, oh, I just
I don't think I was even saying anything. Like,
No.
I think it was literally just, yeah, like you'd just lost all, like it was probably just exhaustion as well of like your mind and just like, but it was like probably, the most like, it was like very just, and that's the thing, it's almost so beautiful because it's so raw and it's kind of like you did just feel like able to like express that there. And like, do you know what I mean? It's like almost like the innermost parts of like your thoughts and stuff. But also like, I think then at that point for me, it was just like, I actually just don't know I just don't know what I can do to support you. Like, I don't know how to respond to this. And like, I think almost at the time probably felt bad about that. But then like, we then had like a really amazing friend who like kind of came in. She's slightly older than us and like offered some wisdom and advice. And I remember laughing at the time because it literally felt like we were doing like marriage counts.
We were like sat in her conservatory just like.
No, she was like talking to you and then talking to me. Shout out if you're listening. I don't know if she'd want her name to be said, but she's just so incredible. Anyway, and then I feel like we basically just realized we probably need to, like, that was the height of talking about it between us, and now we actually need to just like pull back a bit. Like, we need to, like, Soph needs to journey some of this stuff like on her own, like with other people, with like and I think to like bring some lightness back into our friendship.
Yeah, like we just actually need to enjoy being friends. And I think also it kind of almost falls into a similar thing of, I think we mentioned this in the other podcast when we were talking about you getting a boyfriend and the whole thing of you can talk about it. And then once you've said like, oh, I'm struggling with this. And the reality is you can't do anything about the fact that I'm struggling with this. Not that it means like, oh, if you're struggling, you should just mention it once and then never bring it up again. But it was just becoming such like a roundabout conversation in our friendship. And it was, again, just quite draining, quite heavy. None of us can really do anything about it. And it was like, I think we just need to like, you know, for me, like process it either like with myself or with other people that aren't you, and just like have a bit of a break of going round and around in this conversation within our friendship, because it was just, it was just tiring.
Yeah. Honestly, like when I think back to it now, I'm like, oh, it was just very heavy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, just so grateful and proud of us for like walking through it and not being in that place anymore. Speaking of, how did that happen?
Well, okay, so this was like nearly 2 years ago now, when we were at the Cornwall trip. It's like a year and a half ago. So I'm kind of like, I want to be like, and then I did this.
I had this moment.
Fine. But I think, like I said earlier, it kind of coincided with having some more general conversations about our friendship, and like actually where we were already in that process of our friendship becoming a bit more separated out. But I think even just acknowledging, because that was kind of on accident, like it wasn't like, oh, we're purposefully going to change jobs and move out because we want to protect our friendship. It kind of just was happening because of the way our lives were moving forward. So I think more just acknowledging, I think this change is quite good. I think that was one part. And then I think we were speaking about you going away.
Yeah. So, kind of the start of last year, I then went away for 6 months, and you were talking about turning 25 and like the legit, like, no, I think that's important though.
Yeah.
Whether it's to do with you turning 25 or not, you reaching a point in your life just where I guess it almost feeling a bit like this next level of like just maturing, knowing who I am, what I bring, like that kind of
just almost like settling into yourself.
Yeah, like that kind of happening towards the start of last year, and then also me going away for 6 months. And then, like you say, the natural kind of more separation of our lives, I think then just led to this season for you of being able to just establish yourself more, like irrespective of me being there, like obviously just having the physical reality removed of like, oh, I'm not going to compare myself to Rach in this scenario with our friends because she's not there. Like just actually almost like killing off some of those like thought processes. And then I think, like you said, the more natural separation of our lives anyway, still remaining when I came back, still then allowed space for you to just like be more confident in who you are and not feel the need to be constantly kind of comparing yourself.
Yeah. And I think just generally what comparison makes you do is like, if your life and everything that is actually for you and involved in who you are is like straight ahead of you, you're just not looking at it and you're just looking over there and you're just looking at what they have or what they have that you don't have, and actually, yeah, I guess almost it's like a bit of a perspective shift of coming back to, but actually I have this, and just all those things where you can, you're looking elsewhere and you're focusing on another person or whatever it is that you are, in your comparison kind of fixating on. It's like almost that coming back to, but that's not me. I'm not Rach. I'm Soph. Like, so there's no point in me like fixating on who you are, your life, and who you're friends with, what you look like, blah blah blah, whatever it is. And I think, I guess, yeah, that 6 months kind of was a bit of maybe a reset moment in my brain, even of just doing that. But yeah, it's definitely not like a here's the solution to fix comparison.
No,
I don't have a solution. I think it's going on a journey, and I think just entering in, as much as it was like we said, like there were times where it was heavy, there were times where it was really difficult. If you just like kind of, comparative thought comes in your head and you kind of waft it away, but not in a way of like, I'm not going to believe that. Like I would definitely say do that. More just in like I'm living in denial that's how my mind's working right now. It's like you kind of just have to like just buckle in and be like, right, we're just gonna have to face this head on.
100%.
So yeah.
And I think, guys, like to round up, like Soph said, it's like, okay, this is just our friendship story, and like there's not always a solution to there's just not a quick fix, is there, to any kind of like battle of the mind and like battle with negative thoughts, and like you kind of have to go on your own journey. But I think like what is clear is that as you basically took your eyes off me and focused more on who you are and like what you love and the people that you love, and walked more confidently in that, it was then easier to just focus on that rather than focus on like all the other things going on around you.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
Do you have more things to add on? I was just going to say that I think even like retrospectively and going through all this story again, it like I would be lying if I said it didn't make me feel like almost embarrassed or ashamed, or like, oh, I can't believe I acted like that, and I can't believe that was such a massive deal. Like, why didn't I just get over it? Like, why did it take so long? And oh, why did I make Rach feel like that? It was such a stress to put on her. Yada da da da. And I think, again, I feel like we've mentioned this before, but just like you can't, like in friendship, you just have to understand and know, and this is what I'm learning. Like if you have a good friend, you are going to have to go through seasons like this, and it's not for you to feel guilty about and like, oh, like that was awful for me to have done that. It's like that's just part of life, and that's part of friendship, and you have to just be okay with that.
Yeah. And it's like, again, it's like in romantic relationships, you work through things all the time, and you don't break up just because you encountered
this
a
is getting
hurdle.
not very fun anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think like sometimes that just isn't translated to friendships, and we've said this before, but people just throw the towel in way too early. And I guess there is still healthy boundaries in friendships where ultimately, you're not in a romantic relationship, but like in the same way that you would sit and you would listen to your boyfriend or girlfriend and you wouldn't just give up on them when, you know, they were going through a lot of difficulty in their mind. It's like the exact same with friendship. And I think also if you are, like Soph said, just carrying a lot of guilt or shame around it, it's also just like, I'm sure the other person would be doing the exact same thing for you if you were in that scenario. And that's not why they do it. But like, just to reiterate, it's like you support your friends through things because you love them and that's it. Like, and actually it's okay to struggle. It's okay to be honest about that. And it's okay to work through something. And honestly, if you'd told Soph and I in the height of that time that we would be sat here recording a podcast and Soph would not be struggling, you know, anywhere as near / at all with those thoughts that she was having at the time, I think we would have both been like, wow, can't wait to see that day. Like, you know, where it's just like,
yeah, it feels so far off.
It felt just so unreachable. So again, if you are feeling like you're losing hope, just keep going and keep believing.
Come on, soldiers.
There's a day of freedom.
Yeah, we got to fight for this love. Do you know what I mean?
I think you said that in the last episode.
Mate, if it's worth having,
yeah,
it's worth fighting for.
We love you,
and we'll
Shazza.
end there.
Guys,
that's such a profound lyric, isn't it?
If it's worth having, it's worth fighting for.
Yeah, I've actually just clocked that.
If it's worth oh.
Big up. Whoever wrote that song, it's probably not Cheryl, but
well done to us for getting through that time. Guys. Oh, I thought the camera had stopped recording. It hasn't. Love you and leave you. Hope you enjoyed another vulnerable expose on this Not Just You podcast. No tears. See you next time. Ta-ra.
Goodbye.